Last year, I was excited to come to Fairway View to speak, and I ended up having sort of a really freak knee surgery. And I'm going to tell you about this quickly because I will talk about this knee surgery in a few places in my talk later on. So back in April of last year, there was a rowing machine at the gym. I just loved using that thing. And one day, gosh, my knee got really sore. So I decided, well, I'll take a couple of days off. The next week I went back and I was on for only a few minutes and I thought, oh no, right? In fact, I went to work that day and one of my coworkers, I was just wearing like normal jeans. She came up to me and she said, Laura, what's wrong with your knee? It was so swollen. She could see it like bulging out through my pants. So I thought, all right, I better rest my knee. Let's just give it some time. Well, gosh, 6 weeks passed. It was still swollen. There was still pain. So I went to the doctor. They did the MRI, the whole routine, and they said, well, it looks like there's just a couple little pieces of cartilage that have chipped off. We need to remove those. We'll get those taken out. The swelling will be gone. You'll be back in a week or less. Oh, great, I thought. I mean, I wasn't excited for a surgery, but that was better than the alternative. So I went into surgery. It was the first Friday in August. And I remember kind of, coming to, everything's a little foggy. I'll be honest, I was feeling pretty good. I don't know what was in that, pain cocktail that they gave me when I was under, but it took me a while to like realize, wait a second, there's this brace, my leg that they operated on, it was this full brace, I couldn't bend it. Oh, well, I thought, you can't eat before the anesthesia, so they brought me breakfast after the surgery. Ooh, you want to talk about coffee tasting good, right? That was a great cup of coffee. And then I thought, well, I need to go to the bathroom. That's when it sort of hit me, right? And like they'd said it a couple times, but I guess I was so focused on that breakfast, it just started to sink in. What had happened when they went in to do the surgery is they found damage that they couldn't see on the MRI. So the meniscus part of the knee, right, that's what kind of curves around and connects to the bone. When they went in there, the surgeon realized that was 95% detached. So they had to do, this quick little easy surgery. Like 2 hours later, I came out and they'd been drilling and there was a cord in there. And the bottom line for me was, Laura, you'll be out of work. You'll be immobile basically for 3 months. So my leg had to be immobilized in a brace. I couldn't put any weight on my foot and I couldn't bend my knee. When physical therapy started, every day for 5 minutes, I could, roll it up a little bit and put it back. So for me, it was shocking, right, to come out and now suddenly I was faced with 3 months of immobility, getting to the bathroom, right? Suddenly that takes 20 minutes to plan my trip there, to hoist myself out of bed, right? To grab my crutches, to get in. One of the first things, I had a friend go buy a toilet seat riser because there was no way you don't realize how low those toilets are, right? Until you're trying to hoist yourself back up. So some of the things, I guess, that have come about from that surgery were just, it's interesting to me how that was really life-changing. I don't know, maybe a month ago I heard from Emily and she said, well, maybe you could come talk at Fairway View. I thought, oh, great. We'll talk about Medicare, or I have some information about memory loss I could share, right? Those are kind of simple topics to talk about. Emily said, no, I said, well, what are some of the interests or maybe concerns, right? What is on people's minds That's what I want to talk about, right? Let's make this worthwhile. So as Emily responded to me, I sort of chuckled to myself for two reasons. So what Emily said was that she had overheard conversations about people worrying like they were losing a step or slowing down a little. People maybe had concerns that they were growing old not so gracefully. There's also this very present concern of becoming disconnected, our social groups narrowing, that lack of connection. Now, the reason I chuckled at first is because I thought, oh my gosh, I have been having some of these same thoughts lately, right? I've been thinking about the aging process. So I'm 45, right? And the other reason that I chuckled is because I thought, sure, I've been thinking about it, but like, what do I know about how it feels to be 80 or 90 and to be thinking about these concerns from that perspective? But the more that I thought about it, the more I realized these concerns, it wasn't just me. It's not just the folks that live at Fairway View. I think the underlying emotions for these concerns that were mentioned are really universal. Who loves change, right? Who loves to come in and everything's all rearranged? I don't know anybody that would go say, oh, this is great. It's going to take me a week to get everything figured out. Fun, right? I don't know anybody that enjoys change. Loss, right? No matter how old we are, we experience loss. That's painful. That can be uncomfortable to face. And so what I realized is these are universal emotions. And one thing I had to remind myself was it's never, I guess, sort of two things that I want to say before we continue with this information. The first is that I don't think it's ever right for us to compare maybe our suffering or our loss with that of someone else's. That's not what we're here to do, and I don't think that's productive. So here's my first story I'd like to share about that knee surgery. I was probably a month and a half in, right? And I had like 3 months. I was fortunate I could work from home. My bedroom, right, like my bed, half of it became my office side, and I had my laptop over here, and the other side was my sleeping side. But it was about a month and a half in, and a friend of mine from the radio station in Benson, he said, well, Laura, you called in this month. You didn't come in and do the interview. So I explained what was going on. He said, oh, no, he said, can I bring you some groceries, something like that. And I said, no, John, thanks for asking. I said, but John, how are you doing? And he said, oh, I've had this terrible migraine today. He said, it's just so painful. Then he said, well, wait a second. What am I doing telling you this? You're the one that can't leave your bed. And I said, but John, that's not right. The pain that you are experiencing, I don't say that you're not entitled to feel that just because, you'd hate to be stuck in your bed for 3 months with that pain, right? So I think that all of our feelings are valid, and I don't think it does anybody any good to say, well, why is she complaining about this bad feeling, my pain is worse, or to think, well, I shouldn't feel bad because I know a lot of people have it worse. These emotions are normal. The other, I guess, reminder is what we're going to talk about today. The title of the talk is Vim, Vigor, and Vitality. And I don't think it's ever healthy to say we have to be positive all the time, or we have to deny or look away from the negative things that are happening. What I hope to convey is that we always have a choice about how long we engage with our feelings and what we decide to do about our feelings and our situation. So on your paper, now I had it turned over just like for a little dramatic effect, but if you'd like to turn over this full sheet of paper, these are three, I guess I would say very simple exercises that I would encourage you to do. You may have some time to take notes today, but for as simple as these are, I do believe that they take some thought. And I said, did you notice the word I used? Exercises. What we'll talk about today, it's simple, but if you aren't practicing, if you aren't doing that exercise every day, it's not going to make a difference. Okay, so it's simple. I thought, gosh, am I going to be able to talk for a full hour? But I think sometimes the simplest things can be the most difficult things. Some of these I have been doing since 2016. That is the year, it was July 2016, and that's when I made a conscious choice that I wanted to start creating a new life for myself. And so you may be wondering, well, what does Laura know all about this? Well, I know I've given more than 7 years of my life to practicing and working to feel happy. That's sort of how I started, right? I said, I just want to be happy. Well, it takes a lot of work, but boy, is it rewarding. So let's take a look at a few of these exercises. All right, this is a little disgusting, but imagine with me. So you go up to your apartment and you open the fridge and you're digging around and suddenly you get to the back. Oh, what's that hiding in the back? It's milk that's been in there so long it's starting to like curdle, right? Rotten milk. Gross. What would you do? Would you drink it? Ish, right? Like that's disgusting. That would be terrible for me to drink that rotten milk, right? Milk that was outdated. So I don't think it's a too big of a jump to think about what expectations do I have for myself in my life? Because if the way I think my life should be now, if I'm using expectations from 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, if I'm looking at my life now, as it is now, but using things that were true from 20 years ago to sort of judge or make a decision about things, that's really, those outdated expectations are really doing me just as much good as it would do to drink outdated milk. Okay, I'd like to share a couple examples with you of what I mean when I talk about getting rid of things that are outdated. We can talk about decluttering our physical space. That's a really fascinating topic. Emily, I have like an hour-long downsizing and decluttering topic if you ever want me to come talk sometime. But that's not what's important. What's important is the meaning behind the items that I have in my space. Because everything that I keep around me, right, when I look at it, it makes me feel a certain way, or it reminds me of something. So here's my personal example. I mentioned I lived in Istanbul, gosh, for 8 years. I was teaching adults there. They were business professionals, so I had, some real fancy suits, and clothes that I wasn't really wearing for two reasons. First of all, because, well, you don't see many suits at Prairie 5. But second of all, because since I returned, it was getting tougher and tougher to button up those suits. But they were beautiful, right? And they cost a lot of money. So I kept those suits in my closet. The problem was, every time I would see them, it would remind me, oh, you can't fit into those, right? Oh, in fact, sometimes this is, when I think about this, when I think about if I was making someone else do this, it almost sounds abusive. Sometimes I would take a suit out and I'd try it. I'd see, well, let's see how this is fitting, you know, and of course, well, I don't know if I heard any seams pop, but it sure wasn't comfortable. And then I'd start, oh, Laura, you've gotten so fat. You're never going to look how you used to look, right? And I'd put them back in the closet and I'd feel like terrible for the rest of the day. Why was I doing that to myself? You know, the way that we treat ourselves, think about this, because I've had to start thinking about it a lot. The way that I treat myself, the way that I talk to myself, I would never talk to a friend that way, right? If a friend came and said, oh, I've had these suits in the back of my closet, I just feel so fat and dumpy because I can't get them buttoned. Well, I wouldn't say, you fatty, go get on the treadmill, right? I'd say those are 10 years old. You're not wearing them anymore. Give them to somebody who can wear them, right? So one interesting thing when we talk about like decluttering or removing physical things from our life is it's not just the item that we have to convince ourselves it's time to let go of. It's what that item represents. And that's what can be so tricky. For me, those suits, I mean, they represented a different time in my life. I was a high-flying businesswoman over there, right? I thought I had reached my peak. So seeing those hanging in the back, you know, that wasn't something I necessarily wanted to get rid of. But I'll tell you what, and then the stories I tell myself, well, no, I don't want to donate those because they cost good money, right? Well, I realized somebody could be putting those to good use, right? There's plenty of people getting into the workforce. I finally talked myself into donating them, and it wasn't all that long ago. I will be honest. I can't tell you how freeing it felt. Driving up to the donation center, you know, they were in my trunk, and I just was still questioning, oh, should I get rid of this? And when I dropped them off, oh, it felt so good on that drive back. Now when I open my closet, I get to see everything that I love. I get to see things that I feel good in. That makes me smile, right? That gives me vigor. I feel happy instead of like beat up. Here's another example. Outdated expectations as far as what we think we should be doing or how things should be. So I used to love running. I mean, I ran in marathons. You know, they canceled that Twin Cities Marathon a couple of weekends ago. Oh, I ran that once. And I watched that news coverage of how they canceled it, and I thought, oh, that'd be so disappointing. But after my knee surgery, running just isn't the same. It's uncomfortable. It's not something I'm comfortable doing. So this was another conversation that I had been sort of having with myself and thinking about. I can't run anymore, right? And so I love walking, but sometimes when I'd be out walking, I'd be thinking, yeah, but this isn't running. Oh, you know, I'm getting old. I can't do my running anymore. What good is it doing to remind myself of what's gone, of what's outdated? No, I can't run anymore. I mean, I could like run over to that coffee machine real quick, you know, for a refill, but I'm talking about long distances. What I realized is I love walking. why am I so honed in on how I can't run anymore? In fact, what I decided to do, in Benson, we have Ambush Park. They've got a neat little trail that goes around. There's a butterfly garden, lots of trees. And I'd be out there walking and gosh, what's that yellow bird kind of zigzagging up and down? I bought myself a bird identification book. And I would remind myself, it's okay that I'm not running. I get to go out to Ambush Park and see if I can find another bird to put a check mark by, right? Because in the back there's that index where there are all the birds listed, and I'd like to see how long it takes me to get all those checked off. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is to think about sort of what's keeping me from enjoying my life right now as it is. What do I have that's sitting around that when I see that, oh, it makes me feel guilty or regretful or sad, right? Someone told me a story about how she finally admitted to herself that it was time to get rid of her storage Rubbermaid boxes full of unfinished cross-stitch projects. She loved cross-stitch, right? And I mean, she had quite a collection of materials and sort of half-started projects. Nobody does that here, do they? Start a project and then kind of put it aside, and they but she would tell herself, no, I need to hold on to these. I'm gonna, I'll finish these someday. The truth was, in those 10 years, her eyesight had really diminished. And she wasn't able to see well enough to complete those projects anymore. She said, Laura, for me, it wasn't a matter of doing the projects. It was a matter of admitting to myself, I can't do this anymore. And when I look at it inside, I feel real sad about that. So she decided to give those Rubbermaid. Actually, she donated them to the Prairie 5 thrift store in Benson. That's when she was telling me the story. She said, you know what? I love doing my Sudoku. I've decided I'm just going to get a little bookshelf and get me as many Sudoku books as I want and spend my time that way instead. Okay? All right. So there is a space then on your homework. Whoever said homework, or I guess it was assignment, but we can call this the homework, right? So take some time tonight to really be honest with yourself. What do I tell myself that maybe I need to get rid of and move on to something that makes me feel more joyful? All right, next, changing your focus. This sounds so simple. So here's a wonderful story, and I'm going to go back to the knee surgery that I had. So I came out of that surgery, and suddenly, instead of like a month, like a week, and I'd be back, at 100%, I was looking at 3 months, basically immobile. And the first, I don't know, week or 2 weeks, I was trying to, there was nothing I could say to myself to make myself feel better. In fact, someone said, well, Laura, it could be worse. You could, have both legs or something. And I wanted to say, shut up, right? For me right now, it couldn't be worse because I don't know how I'm going to make it through this. Well, after a week or so of that, I realized, okay, I've had enough of focusing on how depressing it is to be stuck in my bed, right? August, September, those are kind of the most beautiful months of the year, and here I am with these 4 walls. I said, Laura, you've got to make a change here because you're not going to make it through 3 months of this if you don't. So what I did is I started, changing sort of the focus of how I was thinking about this whole recovery. And this is what I started to realize. I said, Laura, think about it. You're probably never going to have this life of luxury again. Why? Because there were people, my neighbors, right? Benson is a very wonderful community. There were a lot of people that called and said, Laura, let me bring you supper tonight. Let me come over and clean your home. I had people who volunteered. I couldn't drive, right? So I had people who volunteered to bring their SUV over. I had to hop into the back. I mean, I'm 6 feet tall, so my leg couldn't fit sideways into the car and I couldn't bend it. So I'd have to, right, scoot into their vehicle. There it was, door-to-door service for physical therapy to see the doctor. People coming in, offering to clean my home. They refused to take any money, preparing my meals. I said, what? In fact, the more I thought about it, and the longer that I thought about it, telling myself, this is a life of luxury. You have, right? It's like I've got cleaning staff and a butler and a chauffeur. Laura, you are living the life. In fact, I almost kind of started feeling guilty. Like, this is so awesome, right? Life is good. That, I guess that was the knee surgery was a powerful time for me for a lot of reasons. That was a big one because I saw and I felt how if I look at this by saying, oh, 3 months, I don't know how I'm going to, but just all that negative, did I feel full of vim and vigor? No way. I felt full of, here's I guess an old saying that came to mind. The first word, well, like urine and vinegar, right? Instead of vim and vigor, I felt kind of the opposite. When I changed, nothing about the situation changed, by the way, except people were probably happier to see me because I was smiling when they came, right? Instead of like, oh. All that changed was what I was telling myself about what I was experiencing. We all have that power. We all have the opportunity to do that, and what a difference it can make. What I've written on the middle section here, I'll tell you a little bit more about this concept, and then I'll explain what's here on the sheet. So many years ago, I read an article about the power and value of choosing a word of the year. So choosing a word that you wanted to and would intentionally put your focus on throughout the year. And the instructions that it gave, it said, think about what do you want more of in your life? What do you want more of? And it said, well, if you're real specific, like, well, I would like a $1 million check from the Publishers Clearinghouse to show up in my mailbox sometime in the following year, right? Like that's maybe a little more difficult to have happen, but who knows? If instead you chose the word abundance, right? Or security, that's how do I want to feel? So if we are having concerns or sort of wondering, you know, am I old? Am I slowing down? Look, I might want to choose a word enthusiastic, right? What's the opposite of how you don't want to feel? Maybe if you're feeling lonely, like there's nobody around for you to connect with anymore, maybe the word that person would choose would be connection. And then comes the word, choosing the word. Well, you might take some time to choose that. Other people, it kind of jumps into their head right away. It's like that for me. It's kind of a fun New Year's Eve activity that I like to do with myself, decide what is that word going to be. To make it a little simpler, what I've written on your homework is word of the month. So I would challenge each of you to try this for 1 month, right? What is it today? October 11th. So maybe tonight you think about that word. What word? How do I choose that? There's a couple of tips here, right? Think about, what do you want in your life? What do you wish you had more of? I want more energy, right? I want to feel vitality. Choose that one word. And then, what can I do each day to put some time into focusing on this word? Here are some things that I've done, that I've heard of other people doing. Writing it on a piece of paper. That card, my business card, that's like a real nice weight. You could write your word on that card and put it in your pocket, and then every time you feel that, ooh, vitality, that's right. Maybe in the morning, I don't know who has a devotional time or a meditation time or a quiet time. That is a great opportunity to think about that word, and maybe one day you say, well, what can I do today to feel this or to experience this? I'm telling you, the more focus that you put on it, the more that you see it start to appear in your life. Maybe you start hearing it on the radio all the time, right? Or it pops up, gosh, here it is in this newspaper article. Well, I'm going to read this article, and you think, wow, I'm glad this article, this is just what I needed to read today. I would encourage you to give this exercise a try, because it's very powerful, and well, what do you have to lose? Not too much, okay? Finally, let's talk a little bit more about increasing social connections. And I don't know who read this article that came out, or study, let's call it, that came out this past summer. But the study explained how social isolation has reached such proportions in our society, it is now considered an epidemic. And this was the piece of the article that really stuck with me. It said that the effects of feeling lonely, of being isolated, the effects on the physical body are exactly the same as if the person had smoked 15 cigarettes per day. That is just, it's really something. And reading that, well, gosh, it sort of, I guess, highlighted to me something that I've been hearing a lot in a lot of different communities from people at every age. We are disconnected from each other. But the other thing that it highlighted to me was how we can talk about, our thinking and what we focus on. That's kind of foo-foo, that's kind of nice. But this study showed the physical effect on our well-being that our socializing has on us. That was really eye-opening. I came across an article, and I loved it, because as I was reading the article, I thought, wow, I can understand this. The article is from NPR, and what I realized is there was actually like an audio version of it as well. So I put the information. It was from August 23rd, 2023. Emily, I meant to make a couple of the paper copies in case people were interested in that. Maybe I can email you that like when I'm done, so I'll have those. But I thought the best way would be to listen to this article, and the name is Changing Our Perspective on What a Social Connection Is, and then taking advantage of those opportunities. So I brought my Bluetooth speaker, and I tried this before I left. So
loneliness and isolation are a major public health problem, according to a recent advisory from the U.S. Surgeon General. These feelings of social disconnection can increase people's risk for mental and physical health problems. For our series Living Better, NPR's Ritu Chatterjee explores how people can increase their sense of belonging through all kinds of social interactions.
Before Gillian Sandstrom was a psychologist, she was a computer scientist. So when she switched careers and started graduate school in psychology in Toronto, she felt lonely and out of place.
I was, 10 years older than all my fellow students. And so walking around campus, I just, didn't feel super comfortable. I wasn't sure I was meant to be there. I didn't instantly feel like I was a part of that community.
But that changed when she began running into a woman working at a hot dog stand.
I never bought a hot dog, but every time I walked past, I would smile and wave at her, and she'd smile and wave at me. And I realized after a while that it just made me feel really good.
And on the days that this woman didn't show up,
I felt sort of off and lost in a way when she wasn't there.
Years later, Sandstrom was putting together a research project on what makes people happy. And it struck her that this woman at the hot dog stand, whom she didn't know, never had a long conversation with, had made her happy and helped her get through a difficult time.
And so this relationship that I had with her really got me thinking about how we have so many people in our lives. We're only close to a small number of them, but all of the other people seem to matter a lot, and maybe a lot more than we realize.
So she decided to find out if this kind of encounter with strangers and people we know but not too well had a similar effect on other people's happiness. So she recruited over 50 students and gave each person 2 clicker counters.
I asked them to count every time they talked to someone during the day.
With 1 clicker, she asked them to count every time they spoke with someone they were close to. With the other, they counted interactions with strangers and other people they didn't know well. Relationships that researchers call weak ties.
In general, people who tended to have more conversations with weak ties tended to be a little happier than people who had fewer of those kind of interactions on a day-to-day basis.
Now, growing up, Sandstrom didn't enjoy talking to strangers, but now that she understands how beneficial it can be, she talks to strangers all the time.
It is something that gets easier if you practice a lot.
And here's the thing. Other research shows that it's not just talking to strangers and acquaintances that make us happy. It's the entire collection of different relationships we connect with every day. Hannah Collins is a graduate student at Harvard Business School. She and her colleagues looked at this in recent studies using data from 8 countries.
We looked at who they talk to in a day, in their lives. So we want to understand what portfolio of interactions, so who they're talking to and the balance of those interactions and how that relates to their overall well-being.
What they found was that the richer the mix of different relationships in someone's daily conversations, the happier they felt. For example, a person who has spent their day talking to all kinds of people, colleagues, family, friends, strangers, acquaintances, they're more likely to feel happier than someone who only spoke with, say, colleagues and friends.
When you have connection with lots of different people and lots of different relationship types, it might kind of build the sense of community and belonging to kind of a larger social structure that might be very powerful.
So get out of your shell, talk to people, wave, smile, and see if you too don't start to feel happier and more connected to those around you. Ritu Chatterjee, NPR News.
Pretty good. I'm going to take a little sip of this while I'm back here, and then we'll. Oh, it's just as good as I remember. So that was from August 23rd of this year. And I got to thinking about, in the text of the article itself, it talked about how sometimes when we are kind of evaluating how we're doing socially, we focus only on our strong ties or strong connections, right? Like the people that we would consider our close friends or close family that we have around. But what this shows is that the weak ties, so people that maybe we don't have like a close relationship with, but we share a space with them, right? Or we see them at the same intervals each day or each week. Considering those social connections can really increase our perception of being socially connected. I decided to try something because I do think that the way we think about how we approach things makes a big difference. So what I decided to do was, in my everyday, well, I've got my little like day journal right here with me, and every day the night before I kind of write out, these are what my plans are for the next day, so I don't forget things, right? I can put little reminders in here about what I want to focus on or what I hope goes well. And so one thing I did is I started adding a list where I would write like social opportunities or social connection opportunities for this week. And in there, I would write, like, well, I'm the president of the Benson Lions Club. So that you'd think of as, a great time for socializing. But I also started adding, for example, coming to Fairway View. Why? Because I get to connect with so many wonderful people. How is connecting with people here any different from me going home, picking up the phone, and talking to someone, right? Well, maybe we're talking about different things. Think about this. For me, this is going to be a social. Actually, I mentioned how many presentations I've been doing. I've been flying high from all my social connections from the last few weeks. So why this article was important to me is because I think it can help us maybe shift our perspective. The people that we encounter every day, each of them, is an opportunity for a social connection. And it doesn't have to be, right, like we sit down and tell each other our deepest secrets. It's an opportunity to build a social connection of hello, or maybe even it's someone you see every day and smile at as you're walking by. That contributes to well-being. The final note that I made, and I believe that, and I'm not a pastor, this isn't a religious message, but I do believe that each of us was given a song in our heart. And it is our responsibility to get out there and sing that song, right? And well, I'm not talking about literally, but maybe that's what brings you joy. So when we talk about having a song in our heart, right, that's something that when we do it, we feel alive, all right? Now, I will share one of the things with you, and it's all right if you laugh at this, but when I was young, I used to love going to the basement. I mean, for hours, not every week, every night. I would go down to the basement and I'd grab my pretend microphone, right? And I would do infomercials for hours, okay? Oh, gosh, here's this, this white the white rim around your tires my dad had stored down. I had no idea what I was talking about, but I was selling the heck out of it to my imaginary audience, okay? I realized that I love being able to communicate. That makes me feel good inside. And it's very scary sometimes, honestly. But when I am singing that song in my heart, it's when I feel most alive. And it's my responsibility to the choir of life. And it's your responsibility too. Right? I read this, I didn't come up with this, but if you aren't singing the song in your heart, the choir is missing a note. So whatever it is that brings you that joy, find a way to make sure that you're incorporating that into your day, even if it's, every now and then if I'm feeling down, and this is why I said don't laugh. Every now and then if I'm feeling down, I'll grab my phone and I'll put the camera on me and I'll just say, Laura Thomas, why are you, and I'll do a little chat for myself. And then I kind of watch it and I laugh. And then I say, well, I didn't quite like this angle, so I'll do it again. And suddenly that joy is back in my heart. So whatever that song is in your heart, get out there and sing it, because boy, is that a joyful experience. This concludes my formal portion of the talk. If anyone has any thoughts that they would like to share, now would be a great time.